What piece of junk did you find that turned out to be valuable? Story 1. Saw someone selling a copy of Chrono Trigger for the NES about 20 years ago. It was a great price, and the dude said for another $10 he'd throw in a bunch of other games he didn't want, including Star Fox. I was trying to start a collection at the time, and he figured he'd give me a box of sport games and stuff you'd usually see filling pawn shops, etc. But figured, meh, it's $5.10, so agreed. He gave me the box and thanked me for taking all the stuff off his hands. I got in the car and looked through the games, and there were a bunch of bad sports games, and a few other meh games. But amidst it all was this game that said Star Fox Weekend on it. I was like, WTF is that? Check eBay and the thing was selling for like $300 at the time. It was like a rare NES cartridge that they gave out to winners of a competition, or to other people who won one from Nintendo Power, etc. I couldn't bring myself to bring it back / tell him. 10 years later, I saw some lady on Craigslist looking for a copy of Chrono Trigger for her son for Christmas. I emailed her that I had it, and when she came to grab it, I just gave it to her for free to pay back the karma for getting that super rare game and a $10 box of junk. The thing goes for like $1,000 on eBay now. I can't find my NES and it's driving me nuts. So many games, FF3, SMRPG, SMW, Mario Kart. I could probably replace them all without breaking the bank completely, but I'm not sure if I'd even want them. More people gotta know to look at prices of older stuff like that, especially video games or comic books or even Lego. Those things sell for an absurd amount of money these days, and not many people are aware of it, especially people just trying to get rid of some junk, either online or a tag sale. Good for you paying that karma off though. Story 2. Found an old discarded amp on the street with a post that said, broken, needs some love. It was an old Marantz tuner, a good brand, a good model. I picked it up on the way to my friend's place and I told him, this'll be your Christmas gift. And he just laughed at me. I thought I could make it work, so I brought it back home, choked it out. Turned out that all I needed was a bit of contact cleaner in strategic places. I built 2 bookshelf kind of speakers and a scrapped wood that another friend had. The drivers and electronic components were pretty cheap. I capped it off with a used CD player set in amazing condition and a used turntable that worked just fine. All in all, I must have spent maybe like $1,005. But my friend had an awesome stereo chain and he was so surprised when I delivered it. For me, it was an awesome project. It was the best gift I ever gave away and it was really fun. Especially since before then, all he had was a terrible radio / CD, and Ike 5 CDs, and no aux input, so we always ended up listening to music on phone speakers. Also, my copy of NES Tetris is a tongue-gone version that was only available in stores for like 2 weeks in North America apparently. It's kind of rare, and I've heard it's worth quite a bit with the original box and everything. Those marinades are so dang expensive now with the vinyl resurgence. I bought mine for my record player a while back on Craigslist for around $100, and it's about $500 to $600 on eBay now. And this guy got it for basically free. You must have felt so much pride once it was finished and working though. Those kinds of projects where you do everything yourself from scrap always just give off the best feelings ever. Plus now you don't have to listen on phone speakers with your friend anymore, so that's an added bonus. Story 3. My friends and I were at a concert and found this broken bracelet under a merch table as we were about to leave the venue. It had an interesting engraving on it, something about being a son and friend. Because it was broken, we were thinking about just tossing it, but ended up throwing it in our backpack to bring to the office later. My friend worked at the venue, so she was going to turn it in. The next week I was browsing Reddit on a thread of the same kind of music we were listening to at the show, and just as I was about to fall asleep, something caught my eye. It said something like, this is a long shot but I lost something, and it piqued my interest, so I clicked it. It was someone from that same show asking if anyone had found a silver bracelet. Turns out it was the same one we found and it seemed to be a special gift from the person's parents, and they were looking for it. We connected and got the bracelet returned to the guy, and the whole interaction is actually in my Reddit history. It's a fun, albeit quick read. That is so cute, oh my god. What are the chances that you just so happen to find his post on Reddit no less? Thank God he didn't throw it out or this story would have a much different feel to it, which I'm so happy it doesn't. Small world. Story 4. A few years ago, I was looking through the Goodwill website that lets you bid on stuff that you find. I stumbled across one of the Texas Goodwill's pages, and then saw an auction for a huge box of phone accessories that no one was bidding on. I started looking through all the pictures, started researching some of the brands, and started realizing the whole box was worth a decent bit. I took a shot and made my bid. Someone else saw what I saw and started a bidding war with me, but I eventually won with a bid of $106, then $24 for shipping. A few days went by and I finally got the box. Well, 2 boxes, and they were both huge. Started taking inventory and ended with 100 iPhone chargers, 100 Android chargers, about 250 iPhone 8 cases in all different styles, 80 battery packs, a few iPad cases, and about 1,000 screen protectors. Turned my $130 total investment into an eBay business, and made almost $8,000 in about 9 months. Shop Goodwill has a lot more watchers than it used to, and they do a much better job of price checking stuff. It's kind of unfortunate. Aw man, I was about to say I gotta get my butt on there, until the end where you mentioned there's more watchers and such. That's a shame. Story 5. When I was a little kid, I liked to climb under and hide inside the racks of clothes when my mom was shopping. One time I found what I thought was one of those cheap 25-cent plastic rings that you'd put a quarter into the machine and it spits out. I think that was basically my only understanding of what a ring was at that age. But I showed my mom what I had found, and as it turns out, it was a massive diamond engagement ring. I specifically remember that it had tape around it, which my mom explained was probably because it was too big, and whoever was wearing it was trying to make it more snug to their finger. We gave it to the teenage girls who were working the cash register, hoping the person who lost it would return looking for it and it would get returned. My mom says she kind of regrets doing that because she thinks the girls probably pawned it and split cash. Probably should have taken it to the police or something, but who knows. I like to think that it did make its way back to the rightful owner. Should have asked to put up a flyer on the window for a missing ring, and your mom's number so she could ask the caller for a description of the ring, and give it to the person who said it had tape on it. Story 6. My mom in college worked for a small grocery store. She was sweeping aisles one day when she found a bracelet, and just threw it in the lost and found for someone to come back for later. Months went by and I guess the employees got to check the lost and found for anything they wanted if no one claimed it. She remembered the bracelet and just grabbed it. She got it home and cleaned it up. Ended up being a 12 bracelet wrapped in real diamonds. It's since been turned into a new wedding band for her, lol. Now that's a lucky find. Now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of feel bad for the person who lost it. Story 7. When I was younger, I would rummage around the drawers and cabinets in my grandmother's house, just adventuring and discovering, which is what I called it. I happened to find this old folded piece of paper, but it only took 3 seconds for me to just disregard it and push it aside. I think I was trying to get something else that I saw. After I finished with whatever I had, I picked up the piece of paper to throw it away. Out of childlike curiosity, I opened it up and saw the words in it. It looked like a letter. It seemed important, so I gave it to my grandmother, who gave it to my mother when she came to pick me up. My grandmother is blind. Come to find out, it was a love letter from my grandfather to my grandmother. That really made their day. Kids are always finding the coolest and sweetest stuff when they're just rummaging about. Good thing you asked about it before throwing it away. Story 8. My dad and I are both mechanics and do-it-yourselfers. We both try to see how many tools we can find on the side of the road. It's shocking how many things are left behind at work sites or else fall off of trucks. A few things we found: 2 framing hammers, 2 measuring tapes, 40-inch push broom, various racket straps, a functional fluke multimeter, a 5-inch crowbar, and various other odds and ends. Always keep your eyes peeled. Sometimes this pastime can be dangerous when it involves pulling over on the highway, so be careful. You'd think there would be a poop load of random 10mm sockets lining the roadways. Found 1. I've lost at least 6 of them, though in some ungodly nether dimension hidden deep behind them, but I've never had engines of yesteryear. It's true, there's so much stuff left at work sites, etc. I remember one time my dad found a weed whacker right when ours was dying on us. The world works in mysterious ways sometimes. Story 9. Retro video game consoles / games and electronics. I love them because I love them, but they are often very valuable as well. I used to buy these things way before it was popular, like buying a full-on Sega Genesis, Sega CD, 32 times and a ton of games for like $40 back in the day. Nowadays that stuff is a gold mine. That's pretty cool. I'm not really sure why they're so scarce in North America, not sure about other regions like Europe. In Japan you can find a lot of secondhand retro consoles for sale in most major cities. Alright, who's going to Japan with me? We're about to make bank. Story 10. A couple years ago, I bought a rifle bipod at an antique store for like $15. I was gonna keep it for an airsoft gun, but it didn't have any markings on it and I couldn't figure out what it was. So I made a post on a gun forum asking for info. Turns out I bought a 65-ish-year-old bipod for an experimental version of the M14 rifle. There were only about 5 of my bipods ever made, and the guy sent me pictures from a rifle museum backing it all up. I sold it a day later for $400. But they told me if I found the right buyer, it'd be worth $800 to $1,000. That's pretty crazy. When I was young, I got to see a guy shoot the only Prancer jackhammer combat shotgun in existence. I didn't realize that gun is worth more than I'll ever make. Story 11. So my family went to a nearby town's vintage sale thing. My dad found this dirty old glass milk bottle, and he got excited when he found it. I didn't know what he found so exciting since it was just a milk bottle. After we got home, he explained that it was a milk bottle from a dairy farm. One of the co-founders of that farm was my great-great-grandfather, on my dad's side. When one of the world wars began, he sold it off to the other founder. Too long didn't read, my dad found a glass milk bottle, and I found out I'm a descendant of wealthy dairy farmers. Not much monetary value, but a lot of emotional value. Wholesome. Story 12. My liver tumor and old liver. They both weren't doing me any good, but we made it into slides and sent all over the country, or so was told by my surgeons, as it was so rare and unusual. Got to be in a medical journal. Not valuable in a monetary sense, but more of a scientific / academic value. That's really cool. I was very relieved when my dermatologist told me my mystery mole was of no medical interest whatsoever. Sorry, scientific community. That must have been such a relief to hear, but it also kind of sounds like a roast. Story 13. My father-in-law goes junking occasionally for side cash and strange gifts. One day he shows up randomly with a first-gen Fatboy PS3 with backwards compatibility. He goes, "Hey, I don't know if you can use this, but I thought you might enjoy it." Somebody had it sitting out for garbage. I fired it up, fully expecting to have to do some repairs, but it booted up and played just fine. He refused to take any money for it. He can be a real stand-up guy, but throwing that away for garbage is crazy in my opinion. Story 14. I found a very small round piece of metal on the floor in my workplace. I couldn't figure out what the item was. I knew I should just discard it, but felt compelled to keep it for some reason. That afternoon, my coworker was distraught that the unique type of battery that her cochlear implant needed fell out, and was probably in a dumpster somewhere because the cleaners had come through. I gave her the weird piece of metal in my pocket, and she almost burst into tears from relief. Either that or she was crying because she thinks I'm the type of person to steal batteries from cochlear implants. Oh yeah, for sure that last one. She probably went to report you straight away. Story 15. Dad carried around a junk guitar for 50 years. Ugly as heck, sunburnt Gibson acoustic. Circa 50s or 60s, can't remember. But he eventually sanded down into something prettier. When I was learning, he took it to be turned up by our neighbor who owned a shop and was a collector. Dude came back exasperated and told us that my dad had sanded down about $50,000 off the guitar, and that it would have been totally worthless if he hadn't left the logo on. I got to sand it and was grimacing pretty hard, not gonna lie. Story 16. I collect Pabst Blue Ribbon stuff. I have a cup full of bottle caps. The Pabst bottle caps have playing cards numbers/results under them. I haven't gone through my caps in a while, but I wanted to see if I was any closer to having a full deck. So I empty my caps onto the table and all of a sudden a coin falls out. A 1937 Washington quarter, 90% silver. I have no idea where it came from. My weird cap collection found me some silver. Story 17. In 2004, my grandfather showed me a locked chest in the storage of his home when I was 15. Then he said to me, "The key is on my cabinet," then made me promise to open it when he dies. I kept his promise until he died this January 2020. He died at 101 years old. I got the keys to the locked chest on his cabinet, then opened the chest. When I opened it, the things in there were mostly love letters, encyclopedia, maps, records from famous singers, but the valuable thing I found was jewelry, and a Rolex Insecio watch, which is under perfect condition. He dropped some loot for you, bruh. Story 18. Bought a 1970s Roland TR-66 drum machine, granddaddy to the 808, for $7 at a flea market. All analog and made some cool noises. Had a lot of fun with it. Turns out it's worth several $100s or something. It had colorful buttons but cheesy wood grain signs and back. We had it stashed away in the garage for a bit with some poopy thrift store speakers, also wood grain. One day when we cleaned out junk, my dad tossed it. Well, for some unknown reason, keeping the speakers. Needless to say, I was a little wimp. Well, easy come, easy go. Story 19. Well, it's valuable to me. When I was younger, I went to my grandpa's farm. While there, he showed me my great-grandfather's rock collection. Just a bunch of interestingly shaped rocks. And my siblings and I were allowed to pick one to keep. There was a nice stripy blue one that caught my eye and I picked it. Some years later, there was a gemstone dealer in town. She has some beautiful jewelry and stones for sale, including some tiny pieces that look like mine. Turns out I picked up a blue lace agate. I've kept it close ever since. That kind of valuable is the best kind of valuable. Story 20. When I was 17, I found a driver's license on the ground from a guy who was 22 and resembled me a fair bit. Rarely had a problem getting into bars or clubs with it. It was priceless, to be honest. My friend did this years ago in college. At some point later in the year, he was pulled over and had forgotten to swap his real ID back into his wallet after a night out, and got pulled over. Gave the cop the fake ID on accident and got into a whole lawsuit for identity fraud or theft or some stuff. That's gotta be karma getting his butt back. Thankfully, I don't have to worry about my ID getting stolen for that because I'm equipped with a baby face. I will have a hard time getting into bars myself. I don't think anyone else wants that trouble. Story 21. Not me, but my mom. She lives in a senior's home. Somebody died, no family, so everyone just throws his stuff in the trash. My mom went out to the dumpster before the garbage truck got there to see if anything was worth grabbing. There was a very small lockbox, the cheap kind, and when she shook it, it sounded like it had a few coins inside. She worked all afternoon to jimmy it open, and inside was over $600 cash, and $250 in rare coins. Story 22. Not valuable, but interesting. I was a kid living in South Carolina at the time, and at summer camp. Was swimming in the river when my foot kicked something jagged. Pulled it up and it was a severely rusted shackle like a prisoner. Or, remember this was South Carolina, a slave would have worn. Found by accident but a pretty impactful history lesson. Thankfully you didn't kick it too hard and cut yourself on it. Or maybe it just wasn't jagged enough. That could have ended as a history lesson at the hospital. Story 23. Years ago I bought a condo in foreclosure. We couldn't go inside, just look from outside and put a bid in. My bid won. When I went inside the place it was pretty trashed. I checked all the rooms, calculating the cost of getting it back into shape. At the end of my walkthrough I went to the garage and saw there was a car under a tarp. I pulled the tarp back and saw a 1972 Barracuda in nearly mint condition. That is such a nice car, oh my god. I gotta start bidding on some condos. How lucky does one have to be to just stumble upon that? Story 24. An old coin just in the middle of a field when taking my dog out. I looked it up and it was an old English penny, which was cool. Worth between £5 and £25 or thereabouts. Keep it in my wallet. In high school one day I saw a quarter on the ground and picked it up. It was an 1898 quarter. How it got there I have no idea. I still have it. Story 25. My family Bible. It disappeared for a while. Years ago, a sibling of mine passed away. I was helping her children clean out the attic when I stumbled upon a box filled with old books. I was going through them and found one that was tattered and in rough shape. I was about to toss it aside when I decided to open up. Turns out it was the family Bible with a filled out family tree going back to the early 1700s. Quite the find indeed. It's still in my possession. Would you believe my paternal grandfather was born in 1805? I would not have known that exact date had I not found it. Aw, that's so sweet. I bet your sibling that passed away must have guided you to it. 1805 though? Dang! Family trees are so cool. Story 26. An old book in my grandfather's attic. It was slightly worn and seemed super boring, but I held onto it because I feel weird throwing away the book. Turns out it is the first edition of a book that is over 100 years old, and is worth a couple $1,000s even in its condition. This is why you should never throw away old stuff like that. Like, don't become a hoarder and just keep everything hoping it's worth something someday. But when you have anything like a first edition of something popular or anything, always hang on to it. Story 27. I was at an estate sale and bought a few paintings. A sweet old lady told me to take the last one I liked as a package deal since I ran out of cash. Turns out one of them is a pretty rare original print worth about $3,500, and I paid maybe $30 for all 4 prints and paintings I wanted. Story 28. Will, a scumbag couch surfer who crashed in my guest room for a few months, left behind a 1970s Fender Super Twin Tube amp worth $1,800 he didn't know about. Made cleaning up his pee bottles worth it. Please tell me you played it. Story 29. Found a fake Cartier watch in Goodwill for $10. Bought it because it still looked nice, but it's a real Cartier watch and it's worth $1,000 plus. Keeping it because I'd never buy myself something like that. I'd never buy myself something like that. But you did, albeit for $10. Story 30. I found a small envelope with a few inches of wire in a junk shop. Bought it USS2 because they had some faded penciling about Troy Oz. Turned out to be 1.5 troy ounces of platinum wire. Sold it for $600. Who's Troy? Story 31. Old folded up piece of paper in the bottom of a box my dad had found cleaning up the house. Torn up and faded. Turned out to be a 90-year-old original Giancarlo poster, worth roughly $20,000. After spending $1,000 for restoration, it still amazes me that people just have this stuff laying around their house. Story 32. Someone gave me a hideous purse out of box on its way to Goodwill. I sold it on eBay for $1,100. I've had some good flips, but that was the best. Was it some expensive brand or something? I know purses can get expensive, but assume not much resale value. Story 33. Bought a cheap Martin guitar because I was broke and wanted to play. I didn't think much of it at the time, but it's worth a few grand now because it was a limited edition thing. It's still appreciating to the point where I had to insure it. Martins tend to have a great sound, or at least everyone I've played. Story 34. Typical not me but a friend. She found a copy of a Salvador Dali painting at Goodwill. She loved him and it was a big print, so she grabbed it for like 20 bucks. She took it home and took it out of the old junky frame, and it had a stamp of authenticity on the back. And she had it assessed and it's worth $20K. Lucky jerk. My mom did the same thing, except hers was a Tabuna painting and she found it for $2 and sold it for around $15K. How did the employees at Goodwill stop themselves from looking these things up and buying it themselves to sell it? Is that against the rules or something? Story 35. I was looking behind a custom auto shop and found this microscope magnifying thingy. It looked awesome, but I couldn't convince my dad to let me get it. A day later, he decides to let me get it. And looky here, it turns out to be a multi-$1,000 optical doctor microscope for viewing eyes. I also found a lens hardener, and this giant laboratory-looking cabinet with sinks and a ton of dials. I couldn't take it, of course. So yeah. Now imagine if your dad didn't let you get it and then you guys found out about it later. Story 36. When I was 9 or 10 years old, I found some metal clips in a brooch while playing in some old ruins. Since our city has been there since Roman times, it was obvious that it might be really old. But usually that stuff isn't worth much. Showed it to the archaeologist at the local museum and it turned out it was gold. They asked where I found that, excavated the area again, and found quite the stash of fine terrastatellata with coins and jewelry in it. I was allowed to keep 3 things, and I chose a perfectly preserved diner plateau, a ring, and a coin. And that boy grew up to be Indiana Jones. Story 37. Clearing out my grandparents' house after my grandma passed away, and had to throw out or donate actual hundreds of books. Most were worth nothing and very worn down. In the second to last box were original copies of the Harry Potter books. She bought each one on the day of their release. Story 38. Found some sunglasses in a parking lot covered in dirt. Washed them off and they turned out to be Ray-Bans. It was a pretty good day. I too found some Ray-Ban sunglasses while riding around. I have a main pair of sunglasses that I wear, but these found Ray-Bans are still my backups for 5+ years now. Imagine just finding a pair of Ray-Bans and keeping them only as backups. Story 39. Not exactly junk, but I bought 2 vintage Pyrex bowls at a thrift store. Had no idea that style is actually collectible. I just needed a mixing bowl, and they were the same kind my mom had, so I knew they were good, sturdy bowls. Not sure exactly how much they're worth, but definitely more than the $10 or so I paid for the pair. Story 40. Garage sale box of junk for $5. Had a rare Eisenhower silver medallion that was for a meeting in South America. It was on eBay for 30 seconds and sold for $500. Telescoping Luke action figure, $300. I'm a coin dealer, so I see some cool stuff. Only $500 actually seems kinda low for something like that. Story 41. While fishing at my family's cottage, pulled up a fishing rod which turned out to be the one my grandfather passed away, got as a birthday present, and loved but lost about 8 years ago. I love this one. What a great thing to reel in. Story 42. Well, if my mom were to respond to this thread, original Harry Potter 1st edition Philosopher's Stone novel. It's very rare to find them and they sell pretty well, but she threw it out. So salty. No, Mom, what were you thinking? Story 43. I found a book in a trash bin, The Wind in the Willows. I never got to read it as a kid. After finishing it, I googled the edition date and it turns out it's a collectible worth $300. Who knows? Story 44. My dad ordered some leads and the company shipped white and blue LEDs by accident. This was when those were really expensive. 50 LEDs. He resold them on the trading post. So weird to think LEDs were expensive at some point when everyone has them in their rooms nowadays. Story 45. Bought an old copy of The Wizard of Oz at a flea market for $30. When I got home and researched it more, it turned out to be a first edition. Story 46. Bought a mid-century ottoman for $75, among other things, at an estate sale in New York City. Found out years later it's worth $3K. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe for more videos to come or else this spider will be in your bed tonight.